Anybody have tea? No? Did you sign up for the teapot? Who did not sign up for the teapot yet? Oh, you don't want? Well, you could take it and give it as a Christmas present. I noticed nobody signed up for the Gmail. Nobody signed up for the Gmail. Make sure you get that so that you... Oh, there's two. Oh, excellent. Good. And somebody won the miniature teapot. Yep. And he didn't want that, and he gave it to someone else. So, see, you don't have to take it home. All right. Well, thank you for being here, and we're looking forward to having a lovely meal with you. It already smells amazing out there. We're in the land of the covered hot dish and cheesy potatoes, aren't we? So we're looking forward to that. So we are Glenn and Tammy. Thank you. We are Glenn and Tammy Galbraith. If there's anywhere in the country I don't have to spend a lot of time teaching you how to say our name, it's here, because there's quite a few Galbraiths around the Marshall area, but it is Galbraith, with an emphasis on the second part there. You'd be amazed how many different ways our name gets pronounced. And we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for the many, many years of faithful support that you've been to our family. We really, truly appreciate it. We thank you not just for the financing and the funds that you so faithfully give us, but for the prayer support and the encouragement. It really, really does mean the world. I say this often, but it is absolutely true. We can't do what we do if you don't do what you do. And you keep us on the field, you keep us going, and we really, truly appreciate that. Just to give you an idea of what our philosophy of life and ministry is, my favorite book of the Bible is found in Ecclesiastes. And in chapter 9, verses 7 to 10, it says, "Go, eat your bread with joy, and drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has already approved what you do. Let your garments be always white, let not oil be lacking on your head. Enjoy life with the wife whom you love all the days of your vain life that he has given you under the sun, because that is your portion in life, and in your toil at which you toil under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might, for there is no work or thought or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol to which you are going." You know, God gives us all work to do, and he gives us the energy to do the work that he gives us to do. There are times when we try to do more, and there are times when we don't do what we should be doing, and we discover in those times that the work itself becomes burdensome. And we have discovered that to find real joy in life is to rest in God, to enjoy the work he gives you to do it as good as you can. We always say that everything we do, there are people that can do way better than we do. But everything we do is done the best that we could possibly do. Not so that we get a good name, but for the glory of God, because that's what he expects from us. Just to give you an idea of where we are currently, and there we go. We have been currently on the south coast of England. I think the last time we were here, we had only, I'm not even sure if we were at Bethel. Maybe it's been that long ago when Neil was here. Yeah, so it's possibly the last time we were here, we were just leaving Scotland. In which case, it may be, because we were in Scotland for 8 years. We planted the West Hill Baptist Church, and then we moved down into England. People often ask us, why did you leave Scotland? If you look at that map on the top right-hand corner there, you see that where we ended up in England is as far away from the northeast of Scotland as we could get and still stay in the UK. It was cold in Scotland, and where we were was one of the coldest places in all of the UK. There were times when Aberdeen was the coldest city in the entire world. It was colder than even portions of Alaska and way up north. And that's not the only reason. There were lots of reasons why we left, but where we moved to, it was about 500 miles south to the south coast of England. And it was basically doing a revitalization work. So we call it a head plant or Head Start church plant. So you start with a facility, you start with history, and usually a very small core group. Now this core group was only about 5 people, and they were all older people. They had been without a pastor for 14 years. Then that pastor had only been there for a year and a half, and he was only part-time. I am only the second full-time pastor the church has had in its 70-plus years history. So it was a church that was really barely keeping its doors open. And so we were there for 12 years, and the Lord has done some amazing, amazing things in that 12 years, and that's what we want to share with you today, and also to talk a little bit about what's next for us and the future. Please understand that we are not bragging. This is not about us. We're here to brag on the Lord, because all the work that's been done has been done by Him. We simply were the tools that He chose to use at this time. So I want to give you just a little video. It's about 3.5 minutes long, just to kind of show you the church that we're just coming to the end of the ministry in, so you can get an idea of where we are coming from. And we'll see if this works.
My favorite thing about Bethel, I think, is the very family feel. It engages the community around it, the family atmosphere. So, when you walk into church, you feel like you're already part of something.
And I also enjoyed that the message with easy to understand as well, and your lot of application.
The family. I feel I've had a lot of people say like this, but honest answer.
Feeling that there's will be everything is there, not contained on
Really important thing.
I think that was the most big thing. And work together and to be there together, all in it. You can really feel that. You can really feel people need to get people that are supposed to as well. Like, sometimes I'll come to church and someone will have like a scripture there, and someone will have like a document to read. People standing up whose scriptures are like this encouragement, I'd say it's definitely the family side.
And the church that my husband and I went to before we came to Bethel was really quite big. And it was a lovely church, there was lots of people there. I think I find I love the size and how everyone loves each other. It was just a very family-based church.
The other thing I really like about Bethel is I think we are quite diverse as a body of Christ. It's wonderful that we can live out that global body of Christ in this small neighborhood and community, and we can be family to each other.
When, in the past we've walked into churches that feel cold and lonely and feel awkward and stand out. No one stands out here. We all just are together. It's really special. It's really something I love about it.
Able to bounce ideas off each other, something you don't agree with, something you may have missed, and then we can discuss that, come around and better understand what's happening, rather than just blindly coming in. And engaging, but not overly so, online.
It is just, I'm going to do it. Like, I think I'm going to be one of the newest people here, from partner with me, and by like the second time, third time I came here, honestly, the way that everyone just has genuine love for you, cares about your well-being, barbecues and birthday steps after we sit and talk and speak to everyone during the week, and we have group chats, and it's just so much.
Right. So that's the church that we're leaving. That's the church that God has given us the great privilege of being a part of and being able to bring back from the brink of closing their doors and being finished forever. As many of you are aware, there have been some major changes over the last couple of years. If you keep up with us, either by Facebook or in our Gmails, our new building is finished. A lot of those interviews took place in that new building. And on the bottom right there, that is the auditorium in the new building. And all of the inspections have finally been finished. We're using it extensively, and we can't thank God enough. It's been an amazing experience to see the church come together. It's been amazing to see the Lord provide. We don't have any debts on the building, and that's just been absolutely phenomenal that God has been able to provide that. We did a lot of the work ourselves, and even that was an amazing experience. I could tell you stories all day long about how often my crew were 3 or 4 little old ladies and a couple of retired gentlemen coming along to help and teaching those little old ladies how to use a chop saw and a nail gun. In fact, there was one lady, she always looks absolutely immaculate. So even on a work day, she would come in. Outfit is absolutely perfect. I think she's 76 years old, and looked absolutely beautiful. She said, "What would you like for me to do today, Glenn?" And I said, "Well, I've got a perfect job for you. We're going to be staining some boards, different colors, and then we're going to nail them up in sort of a quilt patchwork. It's going to look amazing." She didn't know what I was talking about. I said, "The first thing we have to do is chop the boards." So I took her outside, and she said, "Well, am I going to get dirty?" I said, "Well, maybe." So she went in, and she got what we call a pinny, like a little apron, a little frilly apron, and she put that on there. And the first time I brought the saw down, she jumped, and she wasn't sure she wanted to do that, but I showed her how to do that. And she worked all day long chopping those boards, and then she painted them all different colors. And then I took her over to an area where we're going to nail them up, and I showed her how to use a nail gun. And after she was finished with that, she said, "I know what I want for Christmas, a nail gun." And just that experience was seen over and over and over again as we saw each other and worked together in an environment that was outside of what we normally see each other. And to see different sides of each other, to work through those things was absolutely phenomenal. And we praise God for the opportunity. But we're in a new phase of the church's life, and it's ready to go forward. It's ready to take its next steps of faith and to move to a new place. The Lord has blessed immensely since we arrived. There we go. And we've held baptism services every year that we've been there. And those baptism services, every year that we've been there, have been the only baptisms that the church ever saw. So in the 65 years before we got there, they had never held a baptism service. And so we thank the Lord for that. It's a tremendous thing in British culture to be able to baptize people openly and publicly, especially adults. A lot of unsaved family members come. It's a wonderful opportunity to share the gospel for these people to proclaim their faith to their families. We've seen the congregation grow, not just in numbers, but also in devotion and commitment to each other. And it's now ready to take that enormous step of becoming an independent church outside of, beyond outside support from churches like yourself. And they are ready to become autonomous and graduate from mission status. And that's an exciting thing. They're a healthy, growing church. We're thrilled to have been a part of this amazing transformation. And you guys have been a big part of that. And I hope that you see that everything that's happening there couldn't have happened without you. And we want you to know how much we appreciate that. And all of that, of course, goes to the glory of God. So what's next? There we go. Until last year, we had never even considered this question. Because when we got to Bethel, we thought this is a church that's so far gone that it's going to take the rest of our working life to get it to a place where it might possibly one day be able to sustain itself. We never imagined that we would finish the work that God had for us at Bethel. To be honest, our lack of faith, foresight. It never occurred to us that God could do so much with so little. That we would get to the point where we would leave. In fact, it's just now hitting us. Last Sunday we told the church, and you're the first people we've been with since. It's a great thing. It's a wonderful thing. But it does hurt. For a missionary, leaving a church is kind of different than for a normal pastor. This church has been our baby almost from birth. To see it get to the point where it's ready to go on its own is the most bittersweet thing I can possibly imagine. After long hours of prayer and contemplation, we've realized that the healthy thing for Bethel is for them to take their next steps without us leading them. So what about us? What happens next? The sermon I preached to you this morning is one I've preached to myself repeatedly over the last several weeks. There have been a number of ingredients, I would say, that have brought us to this place as we have prayed about what God might want for us next. We've considered some really important factors. Our church planting experience in Scotland, our church revitalization in England. For all of our lives, we've been involved in small churches. And that's how God has prepared us. That's the burden we have. That's the love we have, is for small churches. We feel that our hearts are knitted closely to churches that need help and need direction. We've also considered how much time do we realistically have left for effective ministry. At our age, and I know, it's hard to believe, at 55, Tammy's not quite as old as I am, but we're wearing down, and we don't have the energy that we did 15 years ago, or even 5 years ago, or maybe not even last year. Do we have time to start something that we can't see through? And we have to think about that and consider that. At our age, our energy and our ability to do what we've been used to is diminishing. And that's a fact, and we just have to be realistic about that. In the past couple of years, God has been pleased to present me with some challenges in my health. One of the challenges has been eye-opening and made us realize that we have to be prepared for whatever God brings. A diagnosis of a non-cancerous precancer called MGUS 2 years ago is related to the same cancer that my brother has. That's been completely debilitating for him, and it does run in families. While this presents absolutely no challenges right now, and it only requires regular testing and monitoring, it makes us realize that time is short. I have a greater than about 60 or 70% chance of at some point getting that cancer. And so we have to be aware of that. And not that is ruining our life or ruling our life. It's just one of the ingredients that God has chosen to give us. The other health issue has been a bit more troublesome. Is something called CFS, or I can't even say it, myalgic encephalomyelitis. Yeah. It's proven to be a bit more unpredictable. I can go weeks without a problem, and then I might have a flare-up, and I'm able to do almost nothing, sometimes for days or even several months at a time. The worst flares can take weeks to deal with, and the worst one I've had, it lasted almost 3 months. I take a prescribed medication and a cocktail of vitamins. I call it my second breakfast every day, and it helps me to keep this basically under control and to live pretty much normal life. It's absolutely no problem. But again, it's another thing we have to be aware of. We have to think, okay, now what is God doing? Why did God bring that? And what is that going to mean as far as ministry? Along with our commitments to our supporters, I'm also the team leader for BMM UK, and that doesn't take a lot of time, but there's just everything that gets piled on top. You think, okay, what is God doing now? So here's what we do know. There's a lot of things we don't really know yet, but what we do know is that the Lord has prepared us, and He's led us to the UK. He's given us a burden for the UK. He's given us a love for British life. He's given us a desire to be involved in Britain, and that hasn't changed. We've prayed about and considered the possibility of returning to the US for ministry. I would say that God has not given us any peace about that at this time. The UK is our burden, and it's our passion. It's our home. At this stage, we're mostly considering ministry within the UK. And that's right now where all of our focus is. We also know that all of those ingredients that we talked about before means that starting another church plant or a drastic revitalization like Bethel is probably not going to be a realistic possibility. We just don't have the ability physically to do that again. So we're thinking about something that, to be honest, for lack of a better term, we're calling the in-betweeners. A ministry devoted to small congregations that have no pastor. There are literally hundreds of Bible-believing churches around the UK that have been without a pastor for decades. We actually know of a church that has not had a pastor in over 100 years. And it's not necessarily because they don't want one. There are no men to lead them. They are sheep without a shepherd. And when they get to a point where, because they don't have leadership, because they don't have a pastor guiding them and taking care of them, people drift away, just like sheep without a shepherd. And they start to go their own way. And they become smaller and smaller. They start to dwindle. They go into what we would call survival mode. All they care about is keeping the doors open. And they lose their passion and their desire to reach out because it's scary when you don't have leadership and when all you're trying to do is make sure the bills are paid. The idea of having a special event or reaching out into the community, it's a really scary thing. And there are hundreds of churches like that. Anywhere from, like we said with Bethel, there were 5 people when we got there, to churches that maybe have 10, 12, 15 people. So they're not quite as far gone. And they are very viable churches. They are churches that maybe in their town, and this is not uncommon for a church like that to be the only gospel preaching church in a town of 12, 15, 20,000 people. And if they close their doors, that's the light extinguished. And there's a tremendous need for people to come in to provide some leadership, provide some continuity, to provide stability, to train them to do the work of ministry, and allow them to maybe be in a place after a few years where they can now viably bring in a pastor. Or maybe they've been trained up enough so that they can do the work of ministry themselves. In Acts 16, verses 6 to 10, Paul was getting ready to take his I call them Paul's merry men, his troop, his group, into another. They wanted to go to Asia. And he says, the Holy Spirit forbid us. He wouldn't let us go. And as we were praying about this, and as we were wondering about this, a man from Macedonia, which is, of course, Europe, came and said, hey, why don't you come over and help us? And I'm struck by that phrase, because he wasn't asking them to come over and do the work. He was saying, come over and help us do the work. And from that point, Paul concentrated very much on Europe. And that was the plan that God had in place. We feel very much in the same boat. That is not for us to go in and do the work of ministry for these churches, but to help them to learn how to do the work themselves, to model it, to teach them, to train them. So the years of experience that God has given us to help pass that along. And hopefully, within a much shorter time than we've spent at Bethel, they'll be in a place where they're ready to take on that ministry themselves. So that's where we've come from. You can see where we are. We're still a bit tender and a bit raw about leaving the ministry. And these are the things that potentially we are looking forward to. We don't know exactly yet what that means or where that's going to be. We have potentially looked at a location that red square there is about 150 miles or 175 miles north of where we are now. So just to the bottom right corner of that, if you were to go straight down from that red square, you would reach London. London is the largest city in Europe. It's almost the size of New York City, and it's an enormous metro area. That red square, though, the population inside that red square is almost a third of all of the United Kingdom. So it's a very, very populated area, and it is filled with these types of churches that we were just telling you about. So we're at this point, we're praying about that, thinking about that location and wondering if that's where God might lead us to. Again, at this point, that's the option that's on the table. That's what we're praying about. Until that happens, we are also aware that we need to take some time of rest. This church build, not just the spiritual building, but the physical building, has really taken it out of us. And with all of the things that we've been going on, we are quite literally exhausted. I feel like I've been running on fumes for almost 2 years now. And it's time for us to catch our breath, take a break, and really pray about and think about where we're going to do and where we're going to go and what we're going to do next. So there's where we are. There's a couple of prayer requests. Pray for Bethel as they carry on. There is a couple of options for leadership from them. One of the options is a young man that's been coming along. A young man, he's a mature man, but he's younger than I am. So he's been coming along for about 10 years. And he is actually filling in for us while we're away. And the church is actually paying him full time to act as their pastor for this month. And hopefully even for the next 6 months, and then basically they will evaluate and see, is this a good fit for him? If not, there is actually another option of another man that's been coming along to the church for a while now. So they have some options, but we ask that you pray for them. We feel it's important for them to make that decision, not for us to inflict, if you will, a pastor on them. So pray for them as they make that decision. Pray for our son Trevor. How many of you remember Trevor from a few years ago? Yeah. Them and he and Amelia and Tim and Autumn are planting a church in Scotland. They had their first public service last Sunday, and there were 29 people in the service. So they're excited about that, and so keep praying for them. Pray for Jean. I know some of you know Jean Sen, and she's working with us. We've really encouraged her to stay at the church, but that's a decision for her to make. She's really involved with the youth group, with English as a second language, doing music and leading ladies' Bible studies. She's extremely busy in the church, and she's found a real home there. And so pray for Jean that she will have peace about what God's will is for her there as well. And then the timing and the direction for our next ministry is a huge prayer request for us. Right, I think we have time for a couple questions. All right, so what questions do you have for us about ministry, family, the UK? Yes. We've got one other, our daughter Lizzie, yeah. And she's at the church as well, her and her family. And they're looking at moving. They don't know where. Not necessarily because we're moving. They were already planning that. But yeah. Yep. They have 3 kids. Other questions? Right. There are pockets in some major cities where Muslims might gather. To be fair, they're not really any more of a problem than anybody else. They're sinners who need Jesus. The Muslims that we personally have met have been some of the nicest, most generous, friendly people you'd ever want to meet. The vast majority of Muslims that live in Western countries are culturally Muslim rather than ideologically. So just like the vast majority of Christians in Britain, people that call themselves Christians, they're not really Christians, they're just culturally Christian. So yeah, that's been our experience. A lot of times things get sensationalized on the news and you only hear about the really bad situation, you don't really hear about the majority of what's going on. Britain prides itself on being diverse. So, whether it's Muslim or Christian or Hindu, our church in Scotland, we had a Muslim family, came along for years and years and years, and were lovely, wonderful people. They finally, after really grasping the gospel, rejected it, but they still remained friends, and, we still hear from them every once in a great while, but yeah. Yes? Currently we rent a house. It is our desire to buy a house because it's all of a sudden hit us. We've never owned a home in our lives because we've always just been tied to whatever the ministry is. And we realize, well, if we're 10 years away from retirement, it's probably a little bit late thinking this, but we've got to start thinking what we're going to do. One possibility, and again, this is a prayer request, because housing is so expensive in the UK, and it's really hard to get a mortgage. One possibility is that we buy a house here in the States, and where it's cheaper and easier to get a mortgage, and then that would be a house that would be waiting for us when we retire. It's just an option for us that we're considering, but we'll see. Other questions? Yeah, we do. There's a group called the Fellowship of Independent Evangelical Churches, and it's much like the MARBC or whatever, Minnesota Baptist Association, where they're just in a group, an association of churches. And our church was part of that. There are about 500, 600 of them across the UK. Most of them are really teeny tiny churches. And they're really only connected by their theology, by their doctrine. And that box that I showed you on that map, in that box are 93 FIEC churches. And of those, almost 20 of them are without a pastor and have been for decades. So just within that group, there's a huge need. But yeah, they do provide a lot of fellowship and encouragement. It's good to be a part of that. I've learned a lot from those guys on how to minister in a culture that's not one that I grew up